Welcome back. So, the federal shutdown is rolling into its third week. And let's be honest, what started as a political headache has now turned into a full-blown crisis for government contractors. Now, if you caught our first explainer when this all kicked off, you took the right first steps. But the situation has evolved, and the game has definitely changed. So today, we're going to break down the critical updates you absolutely need to know right now.
This quote from our source material just hits the nail on the head. We are way past a simple temporary pause. This has become a massive stress test for the entire GovCon community, and it's putting everything from your cash flow to your basic business continuity at risk.
Look, the basics we covered in our initial briefing, they still matter, but the ground has completely shifted under our feet. The big challenges now are these never-ending delays and some really murky legal questions popping up. And the biggest question mark of all, that unclear path to actually getting paid once the government finally reopens its doors. So let's get into it.
To really wrap our heads around this, we're going to tackle it in 5 parts. First, we'll look at exactly how this crisis has gotten so much deeper. Then, we'll walk through the journey contractors have taken from initial shock to sheer survival mode. After that, we'll dig into the strategic fallout, pinpoint 4 critical policy flashpoints you have to be watching, and then finally, we'll talk about how to build a readiness plan so you can come out of this as strong as possible. All right, let's kick things off. How exactly did this thing morph from just another political standoff in DC into a real, tangible strain on your day-to-day operations? Let's break that down. So just a quick refresher for everyone. A shutdown happens when Congress can't get on the same page with a budget. The funding spigot turns off, non-essential work grinds to a halt, and a ton of federal employees get furloughed. For contractors, that's where the nightmare begins, because those furloughed employees, they're the very people who sign off on your work and, more importantly, pay your invoices. And this slide really gets to the core of the issue, the huge gap between what we all hoped for and the reality we're living in. The expectation was, a short disruption. The reality, here in week 3, is a total crisis. We're seeing agencies issue official stop work orders, which is basically them telling you to put your tools down immediately. That leaves you with no work to do, and worse, no clear idea of how you're going to get reimbursed for any of it. So let's take a look at how this whole thing has unfolded. The impact wasn't just one big event. It's been more like a 3-act play, shifting from that initial shock to a desperate scramble for survival.
This timeline really shows the escalation perfectly. Phase 1 was all shock and confusion. Phase 2, that was pure survival mode. Companies making those gut-wrenching calls on layoffs and unpaid leave. But now we're in phase 3, strategic strain. And this is where the real long-term damage starts to set in. Your future work pipeline is frozen solid. And even worse, there are now threats to your CPARS records. That's your official government report card. A bad mark there, it can haunt you for years. So the key takeaway here is that we've moved way beyond a simple cash flow crunch. This shutdown is now causing some deep structural damage that could really shake up the entire GovCon industry long after the lights are finally back on.
This slide really brings the bigger picture into focus, and you can see how all these points are connected, right? It's a domino effect. Your business pipelines are frozen, so no new work is on the horizon. Then, when the government does reopen, you're going to have this massive bottleneck because every contracting officer has a mountain of backlogged work. All of that leads to a huge liquidity squeeze. And that's why you're hearing industry groups sounding the alarm. This isn't just a business problem anymore. It's becoming a genuine risk to national security.
Okay, this next section. This is probably the most critical part of this entire update. Let's talk about the policy and legal flashpoints that need to be on your radar right now. These are the moving parts that could literally define your path forward. These 4 points are where all the action is right now. First up, there's a huge debate happening about back pay for contractor employees because right now they're left out in the cold. Second, companies that are laying people off are facing some serious legal heat under the WARN Act, which is all about giving enough notice. Third, the White House is apparently looking at some relief measures. And finally, you have got to watch every single continuing resolution, that's the short-term funding bill, because the fine print in those could completely change how and when you get paid.
So the big question is, are you ready for this? I mean, really ready. Is your team actually tracking these shifts in real time? Because trust me, ignoring even one of these could create a massive headache for your business down the road. So, with all this chaos and uncertainty, how do you stop just reacting to the crisis of the day and start building some real resilience for whatever comes next? Let's talk about a plan. The truth is, this situation is changing by the hour, and just keeping up can feel like a full-time job. That's why our source material is pointing to the iQuasar community as such a vital resource. It's the place where these policy flashpoints are being tracked and broken down in real time, giving you the intel you need to stay ahead of the curve. And that really brings us to the final, most important question. The shutdown will end eventually. So when it does, are you going to be in recovery mode, just trying to pick up the pieces? Or are you going to be ready to thrive with a plan in place to hit the ground running from day one? The choice you make today is absolutely going to determine where you stand tomorrow. Thanks for tuning in.